From Pripyat Amusement Park to the real El Diablo, these are all of the rides in the Fallout series in real life, and many theme park references. Just a quick disclaimer, I'm in no way affiliated with any of these parks or Bethesda. Let's hop right onto the Nuka Express and get started. Nuka Express appears to be the Disney monorail at Walt Disney World in Florida. The major difference is the track is upside down, which may seem unrealistic, but it's a similar design of that of Wuppertal Suspension Railway, which is the world's oldest operating monorail. The capacity of this entrance would likely be less than that of Hershey Park in Hershey, Pennsylvania. Fortunately, it has been rebuilt and upgraded. It is notable to mention that the park isn't cut off from the external world. There are small parks like Galactic Zone and Dry Rock Gulch that are surrounded, but they aren't connected. This is similar to Disney parks. Independently, those real-world parks would have ticket booths and guest services and things outside of the turnstiles. As we enter Nuka World, you've likely noticed it is a Coca-Cola themed Disney park, mixed with the classic pre-war Fallout design. Moving on to the Cola Cars Arena, it is unique, but not so unique that there isn't potentially something like it near you. It houses what you may know as dodgems or bumper cars. These dodging cars themselves look like they were inspired by Lucy motor scooters, or well, bumper cars. It's a pretty standard ride. The hardest part to find, aside from their pronunciation, is bumper cars being attached to a bar at a theme park, or really finding anyone willing to bump their Lucys. I reached out to Peter over at Luce to figure out how to pronounce it. He informed me it was on the sign. Thanks for the help, Peter. If you did want to find a bumper car bar, there is Supercharged Entertainment in Massachusetts. They have the bumper cars and a Tappin' Tavern. Let's head over to Nuka Town, USA. Instead of walking down Main Street and seeing the Princess's Castle, you'll see Fizztop Mountain. It looks very similar to the mountain that makes up Expedition Everest. Unfortunately, Fizztop Mountain doesn't contain a roller coaster. Although, if you're looking for some food, Fizztop Grill is similar to California Grill, if California Grill was on top of Expedition Everest. If you were curious about the lagoon, Disneyland Paris is about as close as you'll get to a lagoon this close to the large centerpiece. Before we head outside of this area, the alternative entry point was built later. It reminds me of a temporary real-world haunted house. The way that the paths and mazes are squeezed into just about anywhere, without ever having too much of a line of sight or taking up too much space, you never know what's coming next. Do you think I should convert this over to a haunted house? I can use some mods and get that done. Let's go over to Kiddie Kingdom. This section shares the same name as one of the kids sections of Cedar Point. Fun fact, the company that used to own Cedar Point, previously named Cedar Fair Entertainment Company, or simply Cedar Fair, merged with Six Flags. This makes every park like Canada's Wonderland, Worlds of Fun, and all those other Cedar Fair parks, Six Flags parks. You may have noticed King Cola's Castle. It towers over Kiddie Kingdom and is very reminiscent of the popular Cinderella Castle at various Disney parks. But I'm not buying it. Not just because I have 72 cents in my bank account, but because there's no stage inside. So after legitimately months of passively searching, I can say if you want to visit something like this, but even cooler, you'll have to go to Singapore. At Universal Studios Singapore, you will find the Far, Far Away themed zone. Sound familiar? Yeah, Singapore is cool like that, apparently. In what we'll just refer to as Shrekland, you'll find a castle, and in the castle you'll find a donkey. Under the donkey, good stuff. You'll find show stages at just about any park, but a large castle with an indoor stage? Let me know in the comments. Let's go for a few rides before I get sidetracked again. The Teacups, they're a pretty easy ride to find just about anywhere. They're one of the more common rides at any park or fair that I've been to. But to find one that looks more like these, there's one operating at Six Flags Fiesta Texas, named La Fiesta de la Taza, or Tea Party. These teacups were made by Antonio Zamperla. The ride is flat on the surface, but does contain rotating sections, which contain 3 teacups, just like the ones in Kiddie Kingdom, which all of this was shockingly harder to find than I imagined. A lot of them have 5 or some stationary on the outside of the larger circle, but none just like this. I could compare the Ferris wheel to that of any park. Here's like 10 different types of Ferris wheel on the screen. But this Ferris wheel is different, and I knew I had seen it before. It's from somewhere you may know. From Call of Duty 4, perhaps.
Alpha 6, this is Big Bird, standing by for your signal, over.
The Ferris wheel here in Pripyat, Ukraine is more similar to that Ferris wheel than any Ferris wheel I know of. I wanted to find one of these that would still be operating in real life, so I searched the height of that Ferris wheel, and believe it or not, 85 feet or 26 meters. About the same scale it appears to be in the game. So I searched that, and I had no luck until I went over to the Wikipedia.Russia of Ferris wheels and found one that matched this exact height, which is in Russia. I'm not sure if it's operating, standing but not operating, or gone. The earlier mentioned Cedar Point's Kitty Kingdom has two rides that remind me of Nuka Worlds. The theme of the Mustangs there are a roundabout ride just like this one. They line up to the rally rollers, but they're also mixed in with the motorcycles ride. These were both made by Hampton Rides and installed at Cedar Point in 1970. The Nuka rockets were far more challenging to find. There are rocket rides that move up and down and side to side, but not any that just go in a circle like a carousel. Really just more Mustangs and motorcycles. They've even got dune buggies, police cars at Cedar Point, Kenobi Lake Park has fire engines, and Jeeps. There are so many parks that have rides like this with other themes, but there may be none in existence that contain rockets. I could see why over the years it's simply a rocket ride. It's like being on a plane that just goes in circles on the ground, just wouldn't fit. You just put a different type of vehicle. I'm more so certain it's just because they were tired of handing out the astronaut title to all the riders. To my surprise, I actually did find it. Here at Seabreeze Amusement Park in New York, there are the Star Rockets. They are a slow circular motion ride, and that's it. Nuka Racers reminds me a lot of Steeplechase with how they line into the rail. A traditional steeplechase is a ride where the riders get onto a horse on a track and race around a circuit. The horse is aligned onto the two rails, one that it rests on and the lower rail that keeps it upright. The first of these rides was built in 1898 at Steeplechase Park, and it contained 8 separate tracks for racers. Nuka Racers are 2 cars on a track, but if you're alright with horses on a track, you can actually find one of these still operating at Blackpool Pleasure Beach. It's the last one in the world. The gingerbread house felt out of place, but through a bit of persistence, I found the reference. This appears to be Disney's Grand Floridian gingerbread house. A major difference between the two is that the one at Disney is edible, while that one at Nuka World appears to be made out of wood. In recent years, the Grand Floridian gingerbread house is made with over 10,000 pieces and takes over 2 tons worth of ingredients to make. The carousel is more of a Ferricel, and I can't find a permanent installation of one just like it. If you get lucky and find one, be sure to take some pictures and share them to the Discord. They are really rare to find one that is that bare bones, but carousels are really everywhere. If you go to a fair, a theme park, or anything, and don't find a carousel, I would be surprised. The World of Refreshments is similar to the water ride It's a Small World. You can find it at various Disney parks. On the World of Refreshment, you tour through the history of Nuka-Cola, and this is somewhat similar to real life. During the It's a Small World ride, you're touring through the different cultures of the world. And that's not really that similar, but they're both educational in some way. Safari Adventure is another branch of Nuka World, and it appears to be something like Disney's Animal Kingdom. This is also where you can find Cedo, and Cedo is good friend. When you look up at Angry Anaconda's layout, it is very uneventful and far from a traditional coaster track. I'm not sure if it's vastly unfinished, maybe one of these points isn't where it lines up to be, but I would compare it to something like the manufacturer Vekoma's Mark 1101. There's no ride in the world like this one though. As you can see, very painful, and unless you're on an old school Wild Mouse, even these roller coasters that spin have some bank angle to them. Some of those pull substantial lateral G's. Anyways, I've taken it into my own hands to simulate it. For once, I can say I would not ride that ride. I'd even ride El Diablo, which is simulated later in the video. If you want to ride something like this, don't. That's not all Safari Adventure has to offer though. You can also check out the Safari Adventure Primate House and Safari Adventure Reptile House. These have real-life alternatives as well in the form of Disney's Animal Kingdom at Walt Disney World's resorts. Cappy's Tree House is like the giant tree at Animal Kingdom, and that's about all this area has to offer. Dry Rock Gulch really reminds me of Ghost Town Village in North Carolina. But given that's been closed for some time, Dry Rock Gulch started to make more sense when I found Disney's Grizzly Gulch at Disneyland, Hong Kong. Mad Mulligan's minecart coaster reminds me of Big Thunder Mountain Railroad. There are mine train rides that go over paths briefly, and there are roller coasters that go over paths regularly, but the two don't seem to mix often. The name of the ride, Mad Mulligan's minecart coaster, makes me think of Big Grizzly Mountain runaway minecarts inside of Grizzly Gulch in Disneyland, Hong Kong. Where Mad Mulligan's minecart coaster has crashed, it appears the train is a lot longer than it actually is. If we measure it based off the station length, we can see more accurately how many cars are on each train. This will be the process for determining the length of every coaster recreated in this video. Galactic Zone is my favorite area of Nuka World, but still not my favorite in the Fallout universe. It appears to be the Tomorrowland of the 2070s. One of the first things you'll see coming into this section of the park is Starport Nuka. There's no real-world equivalent I've been able to find of this. Theme parks like Kings Island and Six Flags Over Texas have large observation decks that you could visit, one being an Eiffel Tower and the other being an oil derrick. The Space Needle may be truly your best bet on this one if you want more of a one-to-one style of the building. Blastoff looks just like the rocket jets from Disneyland in Anaheim, California. They're not able to be ridden anymore, but the rocket jets remain there as a statue, just with the rockets being replaced with satellite dishes and the timing for the scenery being significantly changed, and it does appear this thing may not even operate anymore. There are many more rides like this one. For example, the Astro Orbiter that was built to replace the original rocket jets is located nearby in the park, but you can find it at many of the Disney parks, as well as generally any fair or theme park. They may not always be rockets, sometimes they're planes, but Starlight Interstellar Theater is an indoor drive-in style attraction where the guests sit in rocket ships with the old school speakers to be able to hear the movie. The Sci-Fi Dine-In Theater at Disney's Hollywood Studios in Florida is the same kind of attraction, and it's still open today. Vault Tech Among the Stars reminds me of Mission Space at Disney World. Mission Space is a motion simulator experience attached to a walkthrough experience, providing a lot of entertainment and insight into the outer worlds. At Nuka World, they're focused on the inner worlds, and you can tour through an entire vault for fun, because something like that would never happen. Robco Battle Zone. This place reminds me of that show Robot Wars from my childhood. In that show, they would have robots fight each other with giant saw blades, ramps, or flipping devices, and all these other things.
Various disciplines, and the loser from each is eliminated. I
guess over time, the Battle of Robots never really got old. You can still see BattleBots Destructathon just about any day in Las Vegas. Handy Whirl is a basic scrambler ride, but it is a bit different than the real-world installations. Not sure what that is? What about a Sizzler, a Merry Mixer, or even a Cha-Cha? I was searching for one with the scenic centerpiece and had no luck, even in the most heavily themed of parks. You can still get the ride experience somewhere. These scrambler rides are a staple to many modern theme parks, so finding one of them shouldn't be a challenge. The true challenge lies in finding one that doesn't just have these bars of lights. There's also more Nuka rockets over here. They're the same as over there. On the other side of the park, there's a small splash pad named Splashdown, and I think that's what happens after the giant rocket of water sends you into the air. I had a minor graphical glitch at one point that showed me there was a hole, and it definitely was not a little hole, a giant tube. Nuka Galaxy is a roller coaster you can ride in the game. All the other ones you can't ride, I've simulated. It's located at 5 of the 6 Disney parks. Once we get out of Nuka World, that'll stop, don't worry. Not only the station, but the launches and the overall theme of the ride are very reminiscent of Space Mountain. There are many parks that have indoor roller coasters, both lit up and dark. If you can't make it to Disney, you may be closer to something like Flight of Fear or Runaway Mountain, which just lack scenery. Those are at Kings Island and Six Flags Over Texas. One of my favorite references is ArcJet GeForce. It is essentially the Tower of Terror at Disney's Hollywood Studios in Los Angeles. You start on the top of the platform, it drops you down, and you go for a few jumps before offloading at the bottom. In this case, though, with no theme at all. The difference between theme parks and amusement parks. Disney can spend millions on a mountain and a roller coaster to make a great ride, while a park like Cedar Point can spend the same amount on steel and also make a really great ride. On our way out to Grantchester Mystery Mansion, the world's largest functioning fire hydrant. It's real, and it was donated by Walt Disney to the Fire Museum of Texas. I'm not sure how it ended up in Nuka World. Honestly, I'm not even sure how we ended up in Nuka World. You'll find a scrapyard containing scenery, signs, ride parts, and more. But most notably, there is the ultimate UFO. This is the capsule for the classic Gravitron ride. These rides use centrifugal force to keep riders stuck to the wall. And if you've had the opportunity to ride one of these, you may recall the operator sits in the center with the ride spinning around it. And that's how they have the controls set up here. Before we head over to Prim in New Vegas, I think you'll find this interesting. The employee tunnels are another thing similar to Disney. They're of course not a ride, and I don't at all recommend trying to ride them, because I feel like that would open me up to some sort of legal liability. But the way I understand it is they use tunnels for a variety of reasons, like to keep characters in their respective universes, to not break that barrier of sustained immersion in Imagination Land, and also to... I'm just kidding. They don't do that. Unless you watch someone's content without liking and subscribing. If you've never heard of Disney's Imagineers, they're essentially the imagination machine behind Disney. They design and build the Disney theme parks and have truly been the source of a lot of innovation. In Nuka World, you've got beverage ears. So instead of super cool animatronics, you get sodas that can heal you. Disney World does have its own power plant. It's not named the Disney World Power Plant, and it doesn't overlook the park. But they do maintain their own power grid through Reedy Creek Energy Services, which is a wholly owned subsidiary of the Walt Disney Company. They produce their own energy and purchase the remaining energy from the public grid. Wixon's Shovel Museum is an honorable mention since we're already here, and it kind of is an attraction. The Shovel Museum is based on a real-world place in Easton, Massachusetts. You'll find Ames Shovel Shop there, and the adjacent Shovel Museum. That's about it for Nuka World. Let's head over to Prim. The El Diablo roller coaster from Prim in New Vegas is one that kinda doesn't make sense. The cars are entirely too long to go around the track, and the lift hill has no chain. Maybe the train is motor driven, but that still doesn't get me past these clearances. It is based on a real roller coaster, the Desperado surrounding Buffalo Bill's Resort and Casino in Prim, Nevada. Desperado is made out of steel. It comes out of the resort, circles around the entire parking lot area in the front of the casino, and ends by going back into Buffalo Bill's. But unfortunately now it is standing but not operating. While you're there, be sure to check out Bonnie and Clyde's car. At Pilgrim's Landing Pier in the Fallout 3 DLC Point Lookout, you can find the Wheel of Wonder and some bumper cars. The Wheel of Wonder is a closed carriage Ferris wheel. It's hard to find a permanent installation of one with the vertical bars like this. I can find pictures, but no locations, which I've realized is generally a carnival ride since they're always on the move. This is another one recorded after the audio was recorded. I found it, Luna Park in Sydney. Cool. The bumper cars in the same area look like Corvega cars. These are similar to the bumper cars mentioned earlier. Let's move forward to Fallout 76, where there are some new discoveries and another ride on a roller coaster. Welcome to Nuka World on Tour. Fortunately, this is a free fast travel spot because I'm short on caps. There are 3 rides at Nuka World on Tour. 2 of them, the Carousel and the Nuka Rockets, are directly copied from Nuka World. That was easy. This fair is cool because it doesn't stray much from reality. Brands like Coca-Cola or Pepsi supply all that dank syrup to these parks. And they've gone as far as the Wipeout coaster at Pleasurewood Hills being originally called the Coca-Cola Roller, or the ride that was named Pepsi Max Big One at Pleasure Beach Resort in England. And you can't forget about the Pepsi Ripsaw, now named the Pepsi Orange Streak. Nuka Launcher reminds me of a Zamperla-powered coaster. It has no obvious lift hill or room where one would make any sense, unless they added drive wheels later. You can find powered coasters themed with dragons, bulls, open-wheeled cars, and much more. There are many permanent installations of these, as well as temporary installations. If you want to ride one of these, there's one at Valley Fair in Minnesota, named Cosmic Coaster. There is another attraction here. The Tunnel of Love is one you can't find many of in real life. You've got rides like the Old Mill Ride at Minnesota State Fair, but aside from that, these have faded away over time as it's become more socially acceptable to show affection in public. Back in the day, this was a very controversial ride. You can see here that the train is not big enough for the track, so they're likely just decoration, and this is a walk-through attraction and not a water ride like the others. Given the rest of the environment, it's definitely not a water ride. I say this because there is a wedding chapel, and it would be submerged if there is enough water for these boats to float. Before we head over to Wavy Willards and our big finale at Camden Park, you can't forget Tyler County Fairgrounds, because I almost did. This was where I built my first really set up camp in Fallout 76. I can't believe I forgot about it. I'm gonna speed through everything that isn't different than how it was described earlier. There's an unnamed blast-off from Nuka World over here. There are the directly ripped rally rollers. There's a red carousel over here and another scrambler. We'll talk more about the scrambler when we get over to Camden Park. Over here you've got a slide. Just a standard fairground slide. It should all fit onto this trailer when it's disassembled. Then you just have to get the trailer unstuck. You can find these slides at really every fair I've ever been to, and all of them are just a few hours away from being a road-ready trailer. That being said, these things generally won't be found as permanent installations. Arguably, it would be less to just install a slide than it would be paying for that trailer. There are so many reasons you will not find a Ferris wheel like this permanently installed. They're very unsafe. Lastly, we've got potentially the world's most unsafe swing ride. It doesn't actually appear there are hinges for this thing to swing side to side, so I'm not even entirely sure what it was. A human-powered carousel. There is a ride like this at the Pripyat amusement park. It's got 2 seats though. This one may be easier to build than it will be to find. There is a decent-sized water park in Fallout 76. Wavy Willards is right outside of Clarksburg, just like Clarksburg Splash Zone is in real life. There are some big differences, but since there's not other water parks in that area, I've determined this is what the future Clarksburg Splash Zone looks like. If you're in the area, get ready for great success. Do you see this metal mesh showing through the rocks here? I've seen this stuff deteriorate like this at my hometown park. They use a mesh and concrete spray, and while it held up over the years in real life, it looks like it held up better over the years in game. Have you seen anything like that at your local theme park? I've always wondered if that's everywhere, and seeing it in the game blew my mind. For so many years, I've just seen it fixed with gum. Wavy Waves is a large wave pool located on the south end of the water park, just to the right of the entrance. They have an attached guard and a set of blades, and it doesn't really make sense unless it's pushing the water out and pulling it back in or something like that. A wave pool can be made through a few different methods, by moving it with some stuff, or by moving it with air, or by moving it with vacuum. Here it looks like the water may be directly pumped out and pulled back in, but I'm really not sure. Slither Slide's green slide looks not very similar to the slide in real life Clarksburg, but honestly it doesn't look like any real slide I've ever seen. That circular loop on the red slide, you may know from Action Park. These things are not a great success. Actually, far from it. While it is arguably one of the coolest things I've ever seen happen in water parks, you may get a severe spinal adjustment from it. Or a sore noggin. Nearby there is a lazy river surrounding a pool, and this area I believe would be called Splish Splash Zone. Nearly every lazy river I can think of in a smaller water park is surrounding another pool, so this definitely checks out. Crocolosis Mountain is a tracked water coaster, and while this car isn't on the track and the rails are like nothing I've seen before. I originally compared this to SeaWorld Orlando's Journey to Atlantis. I realize now it doesn't line up at all. Crocolosis Mountain is fully tracked, and that's not. I can't find any that are. Over to Camden Park. It's a real place in West Virginia. It started as a picnic area in 1903. This park is the only one that is a directly named reference to real life. I'm not sure if it has smile training in real life. They probably do, and it's just named something different. Camden Park Express is a small railway with coal cars on it. It's not the width of a traditional train, which made this more of a challenge until I went back to the past. It's similar to Disneyland's 1960s mine train through Nature's Wonderland. There was a small train that pulled along many mine carts, and while I can't find the mine carts, if you're okay with just riding a small train, you can find these at most parks and fairs. It may not look like a train. It might be a dragon. You really never know. What I do know for certain is they're not fooling anyone. These are Mad Mulligan's minecart trains, put onto a train track. Strip Miner is a scrambler ride like the one described earlier from Nuka World, Handy Twirl, but this one very accurately depicts every real-world installation I've ever seen. They took it a step further because it matches the paint scheme of that scrambler at Camden Park. The Camden Park Scrambler was made by the real-life Eli Bridge Company in 1938. Scramblers, twist rides, whatever the cool kids call it nowadays, scramblers like this can be found just about anywhere, from Cedar Point to Disney, even my hometown park, which is slowly deteriorating. The Shunt and Bunt are bumper cars, and some of the real-life equivalents for these fit into the design of Fallout extremely well. If we look at this vintage photo of Camden Park and zoom in a bit, you may be able to make out the grill. Radioactive Roundup is a classic roundup ride, not a rodeo roundup. These rides are essentially a wall that you stand against, and the ride speeds up until it holds you against the wall with centrifugal force. The difference between this and your rotor or gravitron is that this thing will tilt you up at an angle to where you truly put the force against the test. I'd never personally rode one of these or have seen one in real life, but I truly want to. There was one of these at the Real World Camden Park, but unfortunately that's no longer there either. There are over 100 of these still operating today, with 70 of them being in the US and 40 of them being in the United Kingdom. These things aren't just fairground or small park rides either. You can find Teen Titans Turbo Spin at Six Flags Magic Mountain, where it has been renamed more times than I've rode my favorite coaster, Steel Vengeance, at Cedar Point. If you remember that Ferris wheel at Tyler County Fairgrounds, I was wondering why I had this in my notes as one of the parks that had a Ferris wheel like that, and I couldn't find it, so I took it out of the video. But now I see that it was in 2007. Camden Park Carousel is less of a Ferricel and more like the carousels you'd find around the world. Random fun fact about myself, I used to operate a carousel that was built in 1912. There's some scrap out here. It appears to be Nuka World's Ferris wheel carriage. There's no Ferris wheel in sight, unless you go over to the Tyler County Fair. There's also the entire seat assembly that attaches to the arm on a scrambler ride. In the park, you can find the Widowmaker roller coaster. This is similar to the real-world Big Dipper roller coaster at Camden Park. They didn't recreate it exactly. It does contain many similarities, some being like the track going through itself and it staying within a very small footprint. There's many coasters that do that, so you're likely to find one of these closer to you. Best I've got outside of Camden Park is something like Thunderbolt at Six Flags New England. If you're wondering, Widowmaker at Camden Park does have a chain lift. But from the angle of that lift hill, I don't think is a vintage ride. That whole ride may have just been a replacement for the initial Big Dipper coaster. Alright, I found two more. There's Lake Reynolds that has a Ferris wheel, just like Tyler County Fairgrounds, and across from Tyler County Fairgrounds, there's a dirt lap, a little oval dirt track. Thought that was cool. Thank you for listening to me talk about amusement parks and fair rides for a while. Here's a special shout out to the channel members. Thank you for your continued support. Also a special thank you to Josh Y, Unlimited Power, because I didn't have any footage for Fallout 3. I was just going to use pictures, and he supplied the footage. I appreciate that so much, Josh.